Entrepreneurship
on 702.
What is emotional intelligence? How important is it in your leadership as a business leader? And what kind of leader are you? Are you a leader that understands the importance of emotional intelligence? The number to dial is 011-883-0702. Would love to take your calls with regards to this topic. I think it is critical. It is so important, folks, as we sharpen up our skills to be better entrepreneurs. This is I can't emphasize how important it is, at least in my opinion. Andisa, thank you so much for joining us, my brother. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Aubrey.
Talk to me why this is so important. I'm the type of person who leads more by emotional intelligence than I do with regards to policy and rules. I use for me this is very, very important. But I know that there are other types of leaders who lead more in terms of law, policy. Why is this important?
So, a very good question, Aubrey. But before I maybe explain it, because I think I need to clarify. When you say today we are human, I think we are always human. I always come back to this thing that you and I always have topics around the science of business and less the art of business. So today it's still the science of emotional intelligence, because it's about creating and demystifying what it is. What are the leading thought leaders in the world? How do they define this thing, and what does it mean? The great thing is it's teachable and it's learnable. And today we are going to unpack it. But before I answer your question again, let me take our listeners back. All right. We said there are three components to creating a winning organization. There's the strategy element, aka business model. How do you create and capture value? There's the operating element, operational design, which is the operating model. It's basically building that organization that delivers on that strategy. And the third piece is leadership. And we did, if you remember, define leadership to say all of management is leadership, but not all of leadership is management, because you'll see that it's quite important to not discount the management aspect in what we talk about. So the management aspect will help you, and this is more the IQ as well, right? Because IQ is about problem solving, and we again spoke about the four types of intelligence. But I guess the two big ones that we probably have deliberated a bit on is IQ and EQ, EQ being emotional intelligence. So the IQ will help you with the strategy, and that is management, because with management, you do need to still deliver for today while creating that organization of the future, right? And it will help you a lot, again, management with organizational design and keeping that organization running and functioning. That's the management part of the leadership. There is the creation part of the leadership, which is now comes back to this realm of emotional intelligence, which is not about management, because it's about that future that we are trying to create. Now, coming back to your question, Aubrey, and I hope we don't offend people today, because you are right when you say we are less technical today, although we'll be referring to methodologies and diagnostic tools. But the reality is that the subject matter itself does not lend itself to an easy science, right? Although there's a lot of science, by the way. And when I say there's a science, emotional intelligence, there's a lot of neuroscientists who've researched on this, as well as psychologists, by the way, because that's in the realm of science, and we'll be throwing a lot of that today. But I think let me take back and define what we mean by emotional intelligence. First of all, I think we have to understand that it's the mastering of your emotions, because I know a lot of people sometimes they do refer, and I think it's a misconstrued concept, because people think emotional intelligence is about hugging each other and loving each other and not keeping each other honest, not throwing the line on the sand and all those things, right? Which is mistaken.
Kumbaya.
They think when we love each other and we can hug, therefore there's more emotional intelligence. And when there are hard conversation in the room, it means it's lack thereof, which, by the way, it's a myth. And you will see as we unpack it. I call it the mastering of emotions, right? And I love the emotions part. And before I came here, I realized that I need to take it back to the basics. And I looked up what the Oxford Dictionary defines what emotions are. Funny enough, they take a very negative view. They call it the disturbance of the state of mind. And by the way, when I say it's emotional intelligence, it's about the management of that disturbance of the state of mind. And before we unpack it again, let's understand, and I did say we will probably, what do I call this, offend people, and I hope not in a bad way, but let's maybe get them to think. Disrupt, yeah. Maybe say, or get you to think. Yeah. At least get you to the point where you're thinking. Yeah. Why are emotions important? And this is now the spiritual view of it. And we did mention even the last time to say that a whole lot of leadership is spirituality, right? And I define spirituality not about the religion, although the religion is as a component of it, and it's a tool for some people to at least understand and navigate this space, because it is quite a complex space, because it's about existence. It's about what I call the source, right? And I call it the source because it's spirituality. It's for me, so that people don't shoot me down here. It's always about your purpose in life. And I take a step back to say that realize that we were all born. There's a reason why we were born. We might not know why, but there is a reason. And part of spirituality is finding exactly that reason of why you were born. And we need also to realize that when we are born into some context about life. The era in which you live in, that's why you have that, again, science of baby boomers and 2000 and all those people, because that context is very important about the worldview that we have in the set of assumptions where you are born as well, whether you are born in South Africa, particularly in a township in which community, to what parents of parents of which social.
What are the worldviews?
Yeah, sure. And that, by the way, creates what I call generational brain washing. That you start having thoughts that are not your own, and thereby feelings that are not your own. I think I'm starting to create a picture where you need to now master it. And maybe let me zoom it home. You grow up being socialized to say all Colombians are drug dealers, for example. By the way, that's a lie. I don't know how many people are in Colombia, but I can tell you it's only a very small fraction that are involved in the cartel business. The other.
Yeah, so we develop certain prejudices. We develop certain worldviews
yes,
that aren't necessarily based on our own empirical understanding of life.
Yeah, they are very far from the truth.
Yeah, these are things that we inherit over time. Yeah,
I'll give you another one, that all Chinese people know Kung Fu.
Yes.
Because when we see them, or the other one that says, whenever you see a person with a tattoo, they are dangerous.
Yes.
Those are socializations of
stereotypes.
They might not,
sure.
So I remember my spiritual teacher used to call that marbles. That's why I love the term that says it's generational brainwashing. It dictates how you relate to yourself and to people. And if you understand now that you are using that sift to relate to yourself and people, you are already starting from a wrong slate. And this is very important, Aubrey. And I say this with the most humblest of opinions, that says, remember, you've got a body which is just a vessel. I can tell you there's nothing that a body gives you except being a sensory and a perceptive organ that's able to do things. Everything starts and ends with the mind, right? And in the mind, that's where the creation happens. The thoughts come in there, the feelings come in there, and those thoughts are then used by the brain to signal to the body what must happen. But if you were to separate, you'll understand that And it's a very powerful thing that says everything starts and stops in the mind. Nothing happens outside except the implementation of whether you are reacting or you are not reacting. And the other thing that I'd like to then draw upon when you, or at least my appreciation of that spiritual realm is that there is no right or wrong. There's only action and consequence. And that's, again, a very powerful concept. So it is quite important that as leaders, we are able to at least find tools to navigate this spiritual, emotional world. So if you understand it's about emotions, and those emotions go with thoughts and feelings, and thereby you then give implementation or dictation to life. So again, it's important to then master how those things you come about to use them as a tool to navigate the world. Now, emotional intelligence, again, there's a fantastic scientist, he's a psychologist, he's got a PhD in Harvard, wrote a book some 30 years ago, I think in 1995. So, and I steal a lot of his ideas, Daniel Goleman, because he reads a lot about these things and he writes a lot about these things. I've read, I think, his book twice now, and he does a lot of podcasts as well. So I'm a big follower of him. He distills emotional intelligence to basically 4 dimensions, right? He says that you need to do 2 things. You need to diagnose and regulate. And where do you diagnose? You diagnose the self and regulate the self. You diagnose the environment and other people, and you regulate your interaction with other people. And what he has then done, you'll see that's a 2x2 matrix now, if we were to come back to the science of it, is to say, if you can plot that with emotional intelligence, we are always diagnosing, and he calls it awareness. Always diagnosing the self, always diagnosing the external world, always regulating, because this is now where you take that sensory part and you are then able to regulate it so that you are able to relate to the world in a way that is positive and brings about prosperity. So just to answer your question in a very long-winded route, Aubrey, that's what, for me at least, emotional intelligence is. And we'll relate it back to say, what does it mean for leadership? So again, if you go back there, and I'll come and unpack them, but I think let me lay them out to say, what does that 4x4 matrix give you? He calls it the domain of emotional intelligence. So the first one is self-awareness, and then self-regulation. Then it's about social awareness and relationship management with other people. So you'll see now that it's both of them are around regulating the self and regulating others. So in just to use a framework, he then says that there are competencies that you need to develop or at least enhance, and we'll talk about strategies of how you do that. For example, in self-awareness, there's a great deal of what you call emotional self-awareness, because it's a competency on its own. And there's a fascinating science there, Aubrey. Okay, this is not Goleman. It could be Goleman, but I think I might have picked it somewhere else, around labeling feelings, because that's another toolbox, by the way, Aubrey. I brought you a list, by the way, I took, because this blew my mind on how lazy we are with labeling our feelings, and hence we are therefore not able to respond to the correct way that we are feeling. But let me give you some other ones that for me were quite important. For example, when you say to someone, you are enjoying, that could be happiness, it could be joy, it could be relief, it could be contentment. So it's easy to be lazy when you are feeling good by yourself and say it's you just say you are enjoying things, but it could be enjoyment in a sense with its delight, or it could be contentment because we're able to achieve certain things. This one I love the most. It says anger, right? There's one around, you must understand what anger is, because you can't just label it anger. You can either label it fury, outrage, hostility, or irritability. the moment you are able to name the feelings for what they are, you are then able to at least recognize what you are going through. And then let's take the ones around when you are lazy. Sometimes you call it sadness. Sadness could be self-pity. Now, self-pity is very different to being sad because you realize something in injustice in the world. Again, with injustice, it's a different action you need to take. Vis-a-vis with self-pity, it's again a very different action that you need to take. So one of the tools that are important, and by the way, you can realize this for yourself and do an exercise and say to yourself, let me find out when I'm angry. Am I really angry? But what am I angry for? Is it because I'm irritated, or is it because I'm raging? Is it because... So again, that's part of self-awareness. So some of the tools is you can keep a journal, write them down for yourself, understand what your triggers are, right? At the end of the day, if you've gone through those emotions, one, put them down on paper and diagnose them for themselves to say, but I cannot be lazy with just labeling the feeling. Let me say what it is, but have a journal so that you are able to keep yourself honest with them.
I'm interested to know why. Right? By the way, Chimuzi has just sent me a message on WhatsApp corroborating the stuff that you are talking about. It says, regarding EQ, self-awareness and social awareness are paramount. She says, it is virtually impossible to have an EQ without these. The Johari window, by the way, which is a model, is a good tool to help with this, and very much connected to what you've saying there. So I get a sense that there's a meeting of minds with regards to emotional intelligence or the emotional quotient. I think the issue is here. So
and Shibuz is right. That's the other half now. This is now the awareness part, the diagnostic part.
Yes.
Both self and social.
Right.
Because again, what I've started going through now is tools to help you assess at least the internal element of it.
But here's my question, which I think is critical for us to keep bringing it back to why we are having this conversation. We're not having this conversation to be masters of psychological theories about whatever the case may be. We want to understand how all of these elements can contribute to us being better business leaders. Right? And really, this is where I want to bring you back to. So what? So what that I understand, the open issues in this Johari window, that there's friendly how does that stuff help me in my business? What do I need to do to improve that, to achieve what? Why is it important for me to why is it important for me to understand the concept of purpose, for example? Why is it important for me to understand the fact that I've got to regulate my internal world as I exist in the external world? Why is that important from a business perspective?
And I'll come back. But first, realize that it's how you solve a problem. You first diagnose it.
Right.
Once you understand what it is, you can then do something about it.
Right.
And that's the regulation pattern. But let me maybe give you an analogy for you. You, in a pitching meeting with investors, and you've prepared this deck of slides for I don't know how many months or because you've been waiting for this meeting. On the meeting, on the day, you get jitters. You understand that the moment you start realizing to say the feeling might be anxiety there. It's not so much your preparedness, but it's the anxiety that you have of you having to sit in front of investors and pitch, because those are high stakes that are there. Now, again, this is now the awareness part. The moment that you are aware of these things, you then can regulate that thing to say, no, look, because part of regulating is a couple of things, and we've not spoken about the tools. Part of regulating, it's having you go through those motions and understanding what they are.
Right.
That it's not about your preparation; it's more about your anxious about the outcome. So you must stick to your story.
Trust the process.
Trust the process, and then we are able to then deliver. And I always use this word again. It's I'm stealing it because it's from my.
I do that all the time.
It's from my spiritual mentor who's late now. He's saying creating a breakthrough beyond thoughts and feelings. You could be going through stuff, right? But it does not mean that those stuff dictate. For example, if you're being anxious, by the way, the next thing, if you don't manage those emotions, you can freeze. It's not necessarily mean you don't have a good story to tell. You are just being managed by that anxiousness. But there is that thing that says, okay, let me stick to my story. Let me trust the process. Let me go through it and let me understand the outcome. There's a concept, by the way, that sits on the regulatory side of the self, which is called that growth mindset. That says, and it again becomes paradoxical, right? That says, be concerned less about the results and enjoy the process, and learn as much as you can with the people that you are with in the meeting. And it makes, and because you're sticking to the process, by the way, and getting feedback in the process and throwing it back to people, by the way. And that then eliminates that needs of anxiety, because you now focus on the process. It does not mean that feeling goes away. You just acknowledge it, but then move on with the process, and you suspend the results.
011-883-0702. Join us now as we talk about emotional intelligence in business, particularly in leadership. Yeah. You've been listening to the conversation that Andisa and I have been having, the elements, the critical elements of emotional intelligence, the different moving parts. Give me a call and let me know at which point did you realize that you perhaps lacked emotional intelligence? Or give me a call and tell me, at which point did you realize that it was because of your emotional intelligence that you were able to overcome a particular obstacle in your business journey? Because in as much as we may have policy, in as much as we may have regulation, there is still an important element of any interaction between human beings, right? It is the understanding of the very fluidity of that process. And sometimes we get it wrong and sometimes we get it right.
Yeah. And learning is part of the journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the reason behind this conversation is to understand that it is a very fluid place. It's a very, very precarious place sometimes, and therefore dangerous for business. But how do you learn to trust the process?
Yeah.
How do you become adept at understanding the fluidity of human relationships as they pertain to your business? We got a couple of calls, by the way. Yeah.
Okay.
You want to say something?
Yeah. So I wanted to give you another example, by the way, where this thing becomes pretty critical, right?
Yeah.
And now I've given you one example of the self. I want to give you an example now of how you do this in the social setting. And so if for an example, and I've seen this a lot, where on a quarter you have not met your objectives as an organization.
Yeah.
It takes a socially aware leader to diagnose what the impact that has on the team, because that can sink the morale of the team. And when you have diagnosed that, how do you then regulate? This is where now you need to motivate people. You need to inspire people to say, look, we might not have the thing, but remember, we are shooting for a bigger goal. We might have missed our midterm stuff, but let me lift you up and make sure that you don't wallow in the failures of today, but we are enthused by what we are driving and the change that we are trying to create for the future. It takes brilliant leadership to do that, by the way. And again, it stems down from being socially aware and then regulating. I mean, this thing that says you need to read the room.
Yes.
I think some of these skills, we do have them. We just have not contextualized them okay, I can't say we do have them. Let's say a lot of other people might have them. They might not have contextualized them in a framework like we are putting it today. Again, this is just but one example. There are a number of things under social awareness that we need to have. Conflict resolution, by the way, is a great part of that. And I'd like to maybe give a personal example of that.
Lots of people asking me, who is your spiritual leader that you keep referring to? But let's speak to Rodney in Soshanguve. Good evening to you, Rodney.
Good evening, my brother. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Rodney. What is on your mind, my brother?
You know, I agree with the gentleman on the last part that he just mentioned.
Yes.
You know, unfortunately, most of the leaders, I don't know how old he is, but I know most of the leaders who are in a position, but the language of emotional intelligence is something very far from one for them to understand. And I'm telling you, as a junior who's emotionally understanding or knowledgeable about the subject, when you do things understanding that element, and he being the person who does not understand, I'm telling you, you're going to leave the company, because this person will be taking certain decisions that contradict the proper way of relating to people in terms of emotional understanding. And then and it becomes difficult for you as a young person to say, but this way we can approach it this way. And eventually he see you as a person who's undermining or who's becoming more smarter than him. Let me just narrate a bit of my story. I survived most dangerous things because of having learned more or understood emotional intelligence. I survived stroke 7 times. I was able to interpret what I'm going through with what was happening around me from my family and friends, telling me that it's amen, there's nothing you can do. But today I can walk more than like today I managed to walk 2,000 steps from the person who was on campus. Because the emotional intelligence, because the other person that I want you to refer to, my brother, it's a Caroline Leaf. It's a neuroscience.
Yes.
She says, these things that happens to you, it's normal, it's just part of life. You just have to know how to readjust them and reconnect yourself to your situation and become a better person.
Yeah. Rodney, thank you very much, my brother. Much appreciated. Very, very important powerful, what Rodney is saying there. I mean, it's absolutely critical that, and you touched on it, to say that everything happens inside, in your mind. But all of the execution happens outside. And we've got to be in a space where we understand that relationship between what's going on inside of us and what's happening outside of us. I want to add what's going on inside of other people.
Other people, yeah.
Because you are there outside.
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm beginning to pick up from what you've said and what Rodney is saying and what Chimbuzi is saying is that this whole process of understanding emotional intelligence is not just understanding what's going on inside of you.
Yeah.
It's understanding what's going on inside of you, but also as it pertains to your external reality.
Yeah.
But also the fact that you are part of somebody's external reality too.
Yeah.
And how all of those issues interact with each other in order to provide you with the outcome that you are looking for.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It's very fair, Aubrey. And let me bring it back to a science, what you are saying. So your ability to understand others, by the way, in the world of emotional intelligence, particularly under social awareness, is called empathy. That means you need to empathize with people. And what does empathy mean? One, you need to take a cognitive view so that at least you understand what you are setting yourself up to and what you are setting, because you can't operate in how can I say this? And it stops this kumbaya thing.
Yes.
You do need to face the harsh realities of what are happening. But they have this then called emotional empathy that says, let me put myself in the shoes of this person. You know, when you say, "Good, I feel you, bro," as if now you've taken that journey. But no, man, I hear you. I feel you.
I mean, the greeting is Zulu.
Yes.
Sanbonan. It's precisely
empathy.
about that. It's about empathy, about saying, I see you.
I see you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see you. And you know, one thing you cannot get away from is then that caring element, because you can't do these things when you don't care about people. You have to take an extraordinary love and care for people without, by the way, putting the organization or the relationship in a detrimental space. Hence, that's why I started with that thing that says the cognitive empathy. But what is happening? If someone wants to kill themselves, you must face those harsh realities that says, hey, there's danger coming. At least let me, whatever I do, let me be aware of the impending danger.
Yeah.
Then the empathy part, the emotional one, is when you really understand their journey and where they need to. And I say it's caring. Sometimes you need to do that white lie without being detrimental. And that white lie is something like, kuzolunga mfowethu.
It'll be okay.
Yeah, it will be okay. Nothing lasts. That's why that strong mentality. No pain lasts, which is true. But look, it's a white lie in the sense that
it's a truism. I hear you.
Yeah. So
011-883-0702. These white lies. 011-883-0702. I hear what you're saying when you say you've got to sometimes provide shock absorbers.
Yeah.
Even in your speech, when certain things do happen. Right?
Yeah.
Somebody might call it a white lie. Some might call them, whatever the case, cliches. Sometimes
it's important. Have you seen a coach? In fact, I've seen this.
It's the lubrication of the hardships of life.
I want to even take the other parts. In fact, I saw, funny, we always talk about Rassi. I saw a clip of Rassi. I think it was halftime. I mean, he was harsh, right?
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
He was harsh. I mean, he was saying, who's Siya Kolisi? Is Siya Kolisi bigger than South Africa? There is no way that Siya Kolisi. Who are you guys? You're letting down your father. So again, it's about reading the room. It's a high pressured environment. You can't afford to come there with a kumbaya, let's hug each other, because you need people to you would argue that he was inspiring them, right? But in a very harsh and to just to tell them that you guys are not bigger than the country, right? But also alert them to say, you guys are not performing where you are supposed to be, because you are letting down your fathers, you are letting down.
I saw that.
It was very intense.
It was intense.
It was intense.
So what that says to me is that we shouldn't associate emotional intelligence only with the soft, gooey, sweet stuff. Yeah. Emotional intelligence is sometimes the ability to draw the line in the sand.
In fact, that's part of under self-management, by the way. Self-management, which is the regulatory part. Yeah. One of the key things of socially aware people is drawing that line on the sand, right? Because if for example, you are if you are a leader that holds very high standard, you cannot afford to drop those standards so that you can make people
feel nice.
That's not emotional. In fact, you're saying that it's called drawing line in the sand. You see, there's a pair, and everyone must conform to this. And by the way, this is how you then uplift the standards.
But by the same token, you're not saying that we shouldn't be striving for a nice environment, right?
No, absolutely not. Because dropping off standards, when it comes now to managing people, there's part of good emotional intelligent people is the coaching and mentoring. That says be tough with the people, but don't leave them to hang. Pull them up on the side to say, hey man, bruh, hey, no, this is not your usual standards. I see X, Y, Z. What's happening? But can we correct this? You have a problem with this.
This is not your ought to be condition.
Yes.
You see, I had a conversation yesterday with my listeners. That yesterday as I left, and I was talking about fear and how we can sometimes capitulate to fear to the point where we institutionalize it.
Yeah.
Where our whole narrative is about how much we fear something. And I've come to understand that courage is not necessarily the absence of fear.
No.
It is the ability to overcome that fear.
Yep.
And the point that I was trying to make, and I'm not sure whether I made it successfully. Some thought I did, some thought I didn't, and that's okay. But the point I was trying to make was that when I say, I'm not afraid of you, Andisa, it is not a call for us to fight.
Mm.
Sometimes it is a recognition of the humanity in you.
Yeah.
That I believe you recognize in me.
Mm.
that creates a situation where I don't need to fear you.
Yeah.
But I see that in the conversation in South Africa, when I say to you, I'm not afraid of you, that is often understood as an invitation for conflict. So that you or I can establish dominance over you, or you can establish dominance over me. And I'm suggesting that there is, and I'm using that because it's the most recent conversation I had around the issue of fear, to say, when I say I'm not afraid of Donald Trump, I'm not saying I'm not afraid of Donald Trump because I'm inviting a fight between me and Donald Trump so that we can establish who's more dominant. Of course, that's a dumb way of thinking. I mean, this is the president of another country.
Yeah.
He's got resources and power and experience and age, right? But what I am saying is that we can't have a state of mind that is based on a relationship based on fear.
Yeah.
If we are to excavate the best out of each other.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm trying to pull this thing back to business to say that is what we're trying to say here, that when we say we've got to establish deeper, better emotional intelligence in the way that we interact with both our staff and our clients.
Yeah.
It is to try and create a situation where you can pull out the best out of everybody for the sake of the business. Is that what we're doing?
That makes sense. In fact, I love the analogy which I and it started with what I said. Remember, we grow up with different socialization and ekas umuntu mawuthi awumsabi, it means you are daring.
Yeah.
We are daring. Yeah.
Boom.
So by the way, it could be when you if you are a self-aware person, it could be that you testing that all the time with values, right? To say, but what is it that what are my values? And when I say values, I'm talking about cultural values and socialization values, right? The part of self-regulation, by the way, says, maybe let me take a deep breath. Maybe let me pause a bit and allow myself to go through all this information and test a lot of these things. It's a good thing you're talking about Trump now. I mean, there's a book, very good book by Robert Greene called 48 Laws of Power, if you've read it. An amazing book. Maybe in that time we are pausing, we are going through those 48 laws of power in a very quick succession and understanding the consequence of what we are about to do, right? So again, other people, because they lack emotional intelligence, they'll go. And when I say they lack, one is they have not identified those feelings and really go through them and diagnose them. And two, they are not regulating them. And they'll just step in there, and the next thing there's a fight, and someone has got blood, and police, and now there's police records, and all this over maybe a debate about Trump. Again, I'm not belittling to say that those debates are not worth having, but I don't believe they are worth us injuring each other over them. But again, the lack of self-awareness and the lack of regulation allows you then to now not bridge what I said. It's the those what do they call them, generational brainwashing, because there's the you know, you need to understand, and that's the good thing about traveling and reading. You start understanding that different societies value different things.
Absolutely.
I made a very crude example, Masango, with you, to say, you know, with the Eskimos, it's tradition to offer your wife to a visitor. I mean, someone will shoot you here in South Africa.
There's an ethnic group in Angola and the northern parts of Namibia that also has a similar kind of approach to
you can
hospitality.
Imagine having those two people now, they are visiting South Africans and both of them lack emotional awareness. What do you think?
They're going to be like saying, how's it to your wife? Listen, I want to say this, but let me quickly read. Let me read you this message from Chimbuzi. I learned importance of emotional intelligence when I always felt misunderstood. I felt that people were irrational and lacked logic, especially when dealing with dispute or conflict resolution, until I did an HR course that touched on human psychology. Also, I learned a lot about my own bias, says Chimbuzi. Absolutely. Here's the thing that I'm seeing that is important about this conversation on emotional intelligence. The more we delve into these issues of emotional intelligence and understand the ramifications and the nuances of our emotions as they pertain to our inner world and our external world and how we relate to people, it also gives us the tools of language.
Yeah.
Because if I say to you, I'm not afraid of you, but I am unable to substantiate the meaning of my I am not afraid of you.
Yeah.
You may understand me as me calling you out for a fight. But if I say to you, I'm not afraid of you because I see the human in you, that there is nothing in you for me to be afraid of. I see the person in you that I can be comfortable with.
Yeah.
I see in you the person that I can share the journey of life with.
Yeah.
I am not saying, when I say to you, I am not afraid of you, that I am saying, let's go outside and beat each other up.
Yeah.
I'm trying to relate it back to business, to how we relate with our staff and our clients. That when we are more emotionally intelligent, we are able to articulate very nuanced, very delicate ideas that may be the requirement for our success or failure.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I guess the important message that I'm trying to tell you, the listeners, Aubrey, is that emotional intelligence is not a vague, fluffy idea. And by the way, it's got those 4 components. You need to diagnose for yourself to say, which ones are you good at, right? Are you good at self-awareness, and then you lack the regulation part, because that's when you need to do? Or do you lack social awareness? Banning abantu who come to a funeral, and do certain things, right? And it's even the same in business, where you come to a business setting and you have not dressed right, you're using the wrong language.
You haven't read the room.
You have not read the room, right? Yeah. So again, if you lack there are tools and techniques for you to address that. Or it's about relationship management. Maybe you can't influence people. Maybe you can't coach and mentor. Maybe you can't articulate to your point, because articulation, funny enough, there's also some complexity with language. By the way, if you follow, there's a wonderful lecture, Noam Chomsky, who says language, by the way, is signaling at best. So you can imagine that even when we are articulate with in fact, you call it fine-tuned signaling, right? Even when you are talking the best language that you can, you must always understand that it's always signaling to the next person, and it takes that little bit of crafting and that little bit of again listening and active listening to really get the message apart. So it's not a fluffy word. Emotional intelligence. It's got those 4 components. Understand which ones we are strong on, and those ones that we're not strong on, address them. But again, the onus is on people to research on these things. I think I've just given you the flavor now. Sure. I could have just maybe gone and unpack and all the strategies behind, but the reading is there. If you want Daniel Goleman, you can go to Google. There's a plethora of stuff on that. There's a book now that's been suggested on emotional intelligence. But yeah, it is something that we need to master.
As we close, Silva writes, "Hi Aubrey, great show. I'm in business and I have a few customers who are currently owing me money. Yeah. Understanding that these things happen in business. However, does one deal with this loss emotionally to an extent that you don't compromise your business in the way that you engage with future customers who may need credit?" Suppose that is a signal that we need a part 2 of this conversation. How do people get in touch with you?
So people can write to me at info@ntiyisoconsulting.co.za. Alternatively, they can go to our website, www.ntiyisoconsulting.co.za.
Thank you so much for your time, my brother. Andisa Ramavhunga, Group Chief Advisor at Ntiyiso Consulting.